Welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Megan, and my amazing co host is.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hello. Together, we are your source for messy, imperfect homeschool advice and community. Now, notice we didn't say shitty advice. The advice is good. It just isn't wrapped up in packaging that has become oh so familiar in the era of Pinterest and Instagram, where it falls in that zone of sounding so incredible that you feel you should be doing it. But that zone also happens to be out of reach for the average person who is also juggling kids and a home and feeding everyone all the freaking time and paying bills and managing appointments and shuttling your kids to events that are all over the place and somewhere in the mix trying to carve out like 5 seconds for yourself. But you're like, yes, I'm going to do that thing on Pinterest or on Instagram.
Right? Look, if you are someone who can do that and still make homemade Fruit Loops where each color is derived from different vegetable powder that you dehydrated yourself, look, more power to you. But we've rarely, perhaps never, actually met those people in real life. Our particular flavor of advice is typically relatable to the people whose hair is, 2 days past when it probably should have been washed and a day past when you're like, I can totally use dry shampoo to fix this. Maybe you've got a plastic bag of socks with no matches that you can't bring yourself to throw away because you remain hopeful that one day some of them will find their long lost match. But deep down, you know that's probably not true. And the overflowing bag of orphan socks is really just mocking you at this point.
Yeah, if that's true and you related to that, we are your people. Congratulations. You're like, oh, great, these two.
And
It's
wait a minute.
official. I've fallen. But yeah, that's what we do. We offer homeschool advice to people like you because we are those people. It's stuff that you can implement to whatever degree possible or appealing to you, even if your to-do list is already multiple pages long and you're considering giving the dark circles under your eyes a cute couple name like Bert and Ernie or Captain and Fraulein. That's the Sound of Music shout out for my other Sound of Music fanatics out there. We were in the store recently and I held up a dress and my daughter goes, to Fraulein Maria. And I was like, have you ever met me? Like, did you think that was going to turn me off from buying that? Like, I'm trying it on now. It didn't look great. Otherwise I would own it. But I was like, have
Were
we
you
met?
trying to convince me that we need this?
Yeah, exactly.
How funny.
Yeah.
So I think to whatever degree possible and or appealing to you is key there, because today we'll be talking about differentiating learning in a pretty specific way, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. But I can totally hear some people being like, they just made me feel so seen because their lives are overwhelming chaos and they're tired as hell, just like me. And now they want me to pour even more of myself into homeschooling. Like, talk about a bait and switch. I'm out. Thank you very much. Goodbye. See you later. But that's definitely not what we're trying to do. Okay. We host a parent book club, and Megan is always talking about how she pulls these little nuggets from books. So, do we expect you to do everything we suggest today? Good God, I hope not. Right? Like, I don't know how you have that much time. But if you can pull a little nugget here or there to implement without it being the thing that sends you over the edge or to your car crying, awesome, fantastic.
True story. I do love my nuggets. I can find them pretty much anywhere. So yeah. The other thing that I was just telling Amanda the other day is that I feel like my brain works a little bit like a rock tumbler where you can put in some partially baked, really rough ideas in there and just let them go around and around. I don't know if you've ever used a rock tumbler, but they're loud as hell and you have to leave them on for like a month. It's the worst invention ever for an at-home science project, but we've done it. But it's amazing. They tumble around in there for a while and then all of a sudden this light bulb goes off and I have something that formed into a usable idea and I can take these ideas and go forward. So maybe what we talk about on the podcast today just kind of goes in your brain and turns for a while. Maybe this isn't the right season in your life, but someday it might be, and you'll be ready to come back and pull out your really smooth, polished rocks and start start rocking what we talked about today.
Oh no, it's going to be one of those days, huh?
Apparently.
Oh, all right. So, look, we are super flexible and go with the flow here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered about tons of stuff. And we both homeschool so differently. I'm an aggressive academic homeschooler, and Megan is a loosey goosey human with anxiety who is rocking a very intentional approach to unschooling. So we are good at seeing lots of different ends of many different spectrums and agreeing to disagree. But that quality does not extend to human rights. For example, we'll gladly tell Greg Abbott that he can keep trying to shove the Bible into Texas schools all he wants, I guess. But cutting funding that ensures underserved children can eat over summer break makes him a piece of shit,
Hmm.
right? It's not complicated. And while we both live in small urban housing, we will 100% hide your immigrant family in our metaphorical attics to protect them from the goon squads indiscriminately arresting anyone whose skin color is darker than a sheet of paper in the United States right now.
When we lived in Texas, we had a tradition that when we were driving on 35 back to our place, you could see the governor's mansion from there in the Capitol, and we would flip off the governor's mansion every time we drove by. So, yeah, take that,
Right?
Greg. Take that, Greg Abbott. Yeah. So, all of what Amanda said is true. I'll add to it. If we see your Black teenager engaged in a traffic stop, doesn't matter where I need to be. At that point, that's where I need to be. We will be there to film the interaction and do everything in our power to make sure that your kiddo gets home to you safely. We also don't keep quiet when the love the sinner, hate the sin crowd starts popping off with that brand of Christian love that really does sound an awful lot like hate, disguised in sugared words. Your family is welcomed and embraced in our community, regardless of how it's made up. We happen to be moms, but all genders and identities are welcome in the Homeschool Moms Unfiltered world.
All right. So, absolutely. Now, back to the podcast specifically. Today's episode, we mentioned earlier we were going to be talking about a very specific topic related to differentiated learning. And today it is a deep dive on interest led learning. We're going to be looking at everything from preschool, early education stuff to high school electives and transcripts. We'll explore what this might look like with kids who have tons of interests and kids who seem to have very little interest in anything at all. We'll talk about what it looks like for each of us who sit on pretty opposite ends of the homeschool philosophy spectrum. So, yeah, we have tons to talk about today.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But we typically begin each episode with a weekly recap. It is part of our attempt to keep it real and avoid influencer phoniness around here. We'll tell you the shiny moments. We definitely have them. We love homeschooling. We love doing life with our respective kiddos. But we'll also share the moments where we hide in the closet or, in Amanda's case, in her car and cry and eat the last slice of cake that we later claim we're not sure what happened to, because we are big fans of showing balanced, honest glimpses into our homeschool lives, not just the curated highlight reel. So, how's your week been, Amanda?
Well, I did not have to hide in my car this week, so that's a positive. I am still, I mentioned, I feel like a few weeks ago at this point, that I have been struggling with these muscle spasms. They started in my back, and now, of course, it's spread to my neck and my hips, and one shoulder decided to get in on the party. It's whatever. It is what it is. So we have a recording today, and I promised to take the kid to a Pokemon tournament tomorrow. And then I've got a few easy days in a row. There's no homeschool Moms Unfiltered lives and nothing I need to proofread, nowhere I need to drive. So I'm going to lay in bed and drool on myself. And by that, I mean, I'm going to finally get around to doing this 5-day course of muscle relaxers that my doctor prescribed to try to sort it out and see, yeah, if that'll finally knock it out and make life a little bit more enjoyable. I mentioned last week that we really needed to get on a better schedule for our summer break because, yeah, Megan likes rhythm. We like structure. We have quite a bit of structure in our home. We need the structure to make progress. It's definitely a work in progress. And by that, I mean it's not really working or in progress. And I have no idea how that's going to go if I take 5 days off to drool on myself. But that is life, homeschooling. Just last week, we talked about seasons and the ebbs and the flows and the highs and the lows. Well, here we are. But I will say, on a random, kind of interesting note, so anyone who has ever driven the 5 in Southern California, especially in and around San Diego, has probably seen those 2 really interesting buildings that are attached right along the 5. They are actually a Mormon temple of some sort. I want to say Temple 47 or 49 or something like that, something in the 40s. I didn't know that they had that many temples. Anyway, it is randomly open to the public off and on this summer for tours. So once we finish recording, we're going to go as a family to go check that out. They're probably going to try to save us as soon as they have our contact details. But it's an interesting opportunity. When we travel, we like to go to churches and temples and different things like that. So yeah, I actually, many years ago now at this point, I did a bunch of the temples and churches in Independence, Missouri, for anyone who's familiar with the LDS church and how it's split into a bunch of other churches and all of that jazz. And so Independence is like their main spot. So anyway, yeah, time to add an LDS temple to the list.
There you go. Can you give them fake information so that you don't end up on the We Must Save You list? We had somebody drop off stuff at our house one day when we moved to South Carolina. Apparently the churches scour the public records of real estate transactions, and somebody came with paper towels and random welcome to living in this house kind of stuff and a Bible. And I was like, okay, great. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was new. I mean, I had at that point homeschooled in North Carolina, Texas, Florida. That was a new one for me that we were using public records to recruit. I was like, okay.
Well, yeah.
If you do that, the next time the Book of Mormon tours, or if you end up in New York at any point in your travels, oh my gosh, you have to take your kiddo. It is the funniest. Oh my gosh, most amazing. Most amazing. So good. So good. It's the South Park guys. How could it not be good?
I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that they won't actually be able to get to our door. I have at various times lived in standalone houses where it's not uncommon to have the Mormon missionaries come knock at your door. We live in a condo complex. It's a gated community with security, not really security. I don't know exactly what they are. I wouldn't really, but gate codes and elevator codes and all of that jazz. So I'm optimistic that even if they do get our information, the best they can do is try to call us. And I don't answer those spam potential calls. So hopefully it'll be fine. We'll see.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, how's your week been? What you up to?
Well, while you were talking, my number one goal was trying not to melt. I could feel sweat pooling on my face. I had to wipe it off because we are in the middle of a heat wave. So our predicted high for today was between 101 and 105. And the most my phone ever said we hit was 102, which if you're living in Arizona or Texas, you're like, okay, whatever. But we don't have air conditioning. There's no central air here. It's so different than when you live in a house and all you do is go from your air conditioned house to your air conditioned car to the air conditioned supermarket. We walk everywhere and we ride the metro that has no air conditioning. We do have a tiny little room air conditioner, but it is definitely a season of less clothing in our house right now where I will be in the kitchen in a bra and underwear cooking.
I bought so many groceries that I did not, in fact, need when we lived in Belgium and the heat waves would happen because
Hi for today.
the grocery store was one of the few places that was air conditioned. Even the mall wasn't necessarily air conditioned. The grocery store was. And so it was just like, I'm going to go and buy this one thing. And then you're like, oh, I need more air conditioning. I'm going to go buy this other thing. Yeah.
I had to take my kiddo to the dermatologist the other day and it was a really fancy clinic. And we got there and I was like, we should hang out here. The air conditioning was amazing. So yeah, I feel that. So yeah, it's toasty. It's very, very toasty, but we're doing okay. I went to water aerobics today for the first time at the gym. I've been sharing a little bit about my gym journey and how 2026 is my year to like take back my life after having poured. I mean, I'm still pouring myself into my children, don't get me wrong, but I was giving them every ounce of my body and soul. And I'm like, no, they're a little older now. I'm going to take some of my time back and try to have some me time. So this is part of it. But the other day, I got hit with the metro closing gate thingy when you scan your ticket and it opens and you go through and then it closes. And every once in a while, it's not timed properly. And it hit me really hard on the side of my rib cage to the point that I still have trouble taking deep breaths. And I Googled it. It said even if it's broken, they don't do anything. So I was like, I'll just take it easy, I guess, and take some ibuprofen. I don't know. So I went to water aerobics today. My daughter was making fun of me because she was like, you're going to be the only person there who hasn't gone through menopause. And she was right. And you need a swim cap in order to use the pool at the gym. And I really wanted one of those 1960s ones with the big daisies, like the big plastic flowers on the
Yeah.
sides, but couldn't find one anywhere nearby. So my swim cap is boring. But yeah, so knocked that out of the park today. I was stellar in water aerobics
Nice.
because the median age was like 82. So I was doing good, but it worked and I had fun. And we listened to like
There you
Reet
go.
Petite and Jailhouse Rock. And so I had a good time. So yeah, but yeah, what else? My daughter's got a bunch of magazine proposals she's working on. She's written historically for a number of magazines, and a lot of them that are fiber arts related put out project proposals or scope of what they're looking for, kind of a prospectus. And so you kind of think, what could I do that fits into that scope that they've shared and whatever. So it's been a lot of, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And maybe I could partner with this person, which is pretty common in the world that she works in, where one person will take one part of the project and whatever. So she's got two of those going on. And there's a lot. She's 17. So it's a lot of, this person said this in this email. And like, I really don't want to go in that direction. So it's all that interpersonal stuff that she's doing well. And then my only other big thing that I'm working on is that my almost 15-year-old is going to summer camp next month. Oh my gosh, he's going this month. Holy cow, it's now July. Okay, he's going to camp this month. And he's supposed to bring nice clothes with him to be able to do outings. They might go to like the opera in the evening or the museum. And this is a child who only wears joggers and t-shirts with either Pokemon or penguins on them.
Mhm.
And he's wildly neurodivergent. It's not just a personal preference, it's sensory, which hell, even if it was personal preference, more power to you. So we're going to go work on either finding something at the store that meets his criteria as far as fabric concerns and waistbands, but also falls into the category of nice by
Mm.
British standards, which is way nicer than. Oh, so it's going to be interesting. Worst case scenario, I told him I would just sew him something and make him whatever. And that way it can be completely custom to whatever he wants. I'm sure he could get away with one outfit. So, but that's going to be fun. So I'm looking forward to that mall shopping trip. But maybe there'll be air conditioning at the mall and it'll be fine. We'll see. So, yeah.
I have bought my husband so many of those pants that feel like sweatpants or joggers, but they look like dress pants.
Mhm.
I do not recall really seeing any of them when we lived in Europe. So if you can't find them, at least I'm sure you can find some patterns to be able to make him a pair or two, find something that'll work.
That's
Good
it. I
luck.
mean, I could take the jogger pattern basically and just use better fabric. And as long as something's covering the waistband, you wouldn't
Yeah.
notice that it's an elastic waist and whatever. So I'm like, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
figure it out. I'll make it work. So I've got 3 weeks. So it gives me time that if I do need to sew something, I can. So
Yeah.
we'll be good. But yeah.
Nice.
All right. So interest led learning. I'm pretty pumped about this topic today. It's going to be good. We did an episode a couple of weeks back about play based learning for our littles. And we started out that episode by saying how the term is so often misunderstood. And I feel like interest led learning is kind of in a similar situation. Now, I feel like that could be because so many people define the concept or implement the topic differently, and that's okay. With play based learning, the misunderstanding is not amazing because there's plenty of people who write it off when it's actually the best practice standard. So that's a little bit different. But here you can implement interest led learning in a whole wide range of ways, and that's totally okay. But I would venture a guess that there's probably a fair amount of misunderstanding or intrigue just around this term in general, especially if you're new.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I remember when I was new and people were throwing around lingo and terminology left, right, and center, and
Hmm.
you're trying to piece together what everything means from context clues. It can be hard. It can be really hard. And I think that likely leads to this wide swing of how some of these terms are interpreted. And honestly, not all of those interpretations are wrong. So today we'll be talking through some ways to implement or engage with interest led learning, but it doesn't mean everything outside of this discussion is therefore wrong.
Yeah. All right. So let's kick off with why interest led learning is even something we're focusing on. So if you've ever listened to us before, you likely know that we love research and data. So the homeschool community at large is full of people, oftentimes very loudly, telling you the best ways to do things, but their advice is solely based on their anecdotal experience or perhaps worse, I'm not sure, just vibes. Just, I'm rolling with vibes here. So that's not us. We would rather lean into a book, for example, that's titled The Cambridge Handbook of Motivation and Learning. And it's filled with data compiled by two leading scholars in educational motivation and interest research. They are
Data.
named.
Whose data?
Yeah.
Whose data?
Yeah.
I did
I
my
did
own
my own
research.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So this book was written by Kay Ann Renninger, who is a Darwin P. Cartwright Professor of Social Theory and Social Action, and Suzanne E. Hiddy, who is an adjunct professor at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. In their book, they explain that developing interest is a powerful support for deeper learning. The presence of even some interest beneficially affects individuals' attention and memory, as well as their motivation and meaningful engagement. They point to interest as a determinant of learners' understanding, effort, and feedback preferences, and the coordination of their phase of interest development with their abilities to set and realize goals, feel self-efficacy, and self-regulate. So in other words, when a human being, end quote. Okay. So in other words, when a human being is interested in what they're learning, it is easier to learn it and it actually sticks. However, a lot of times we see interest-led learning being either ignored for a more cookie cutter approach because it's safer, or being offered as a bonus after the cookie cutter safer requirements are done. Then, with whatever time is left over, interest led projects or topics are offered up as some sort of reward. When the reality is, we can, you don't have to, but we can use that interest as the vehicle for learning anything.
Well, yeah. And even if you're sold on the science, you might be like, okay, but how? How do I take an interest in Beyblades? Oh God, Beyblades. And turn that into deep learning. So often people in homeschool groups throw out things like, just let them follow their passions. And sure, that's been an especially huge factor in Megan's homeschool journey, but it's also pretty important in mine too. There's just a hell of a lot more to it than just let them follow their passions. So today we're going to be focusing on exactly how you can build an incredible education around things that light your kid up. To do that, let's start with what exactly interest-based learning isn't, at least according to us and for the purposes of this episode. Okay, so for the purposes of this episode, it isn't never learning difficult things. It isn't never doing math. It isn't letting kids play video games 14 hours a day. It isn't completely abandoning academics and or curriculum. And it also isn't only studying one topic forever.
Yeah. Sorry, I was tracking a teenager on the locator app while you were chatting for a second.
No worries.
Sorry. Okay. They're almost home though. Okay. So now for what it is, that's going to look different by age, in my opinion. So we're going to explore today everything from preschool to high school and talk about how we would each implement interest-led learning at those various stages. So before we jump into preschool though, I'll say, like so much about homeschooling, a prerequisite for interest-led learning working and feeling natural and being really ingrained in your homeschool culture is that you have deschooled. You have to be in a place where you are comfortable doing something different or unorthodox, at least part of the time. If you're still asking your neighbors what their kids of the same age are doing in public school and then making sure you're on the same page, this is going to be a little bit tougher. So, deschool, deschool, deschool. Okay. Yes, we talk about the big chunk of deschooling before you start homeschooling. We have a whole episode about it, but it's a continual process of kind of unpacking all that stuff while you're working. So find community support, come to a Patreon meeting or book a coaching session, because this will be very different, this interest-led learning conversation, from the one size fits all plans that schools offer. And that might feel a little bit scary if you haven't built that foundation and done that work yet. Okay. So preschool. Now, if you've been around for a minute, you know we are big fans of play-based preschool. Just did a whole episode on it. And we are big fans of delayed formal academics. Even Miss Academic Aggressive Homeschooler over there is like, yeah, that's what the science says. So that's what we did. And again, it's all data, not vibes. Okay. So let's say you have a kid who loves trucks. The goal isn't to teach truck school. It's to use trucks as the doorway into learning skills that would have been taught anyway in the one size fits all cookie cutter model. So for early math, things like counting trucks, comparing size of trucks, sorting by color, making patterns, measuring how far trucks roll. Literacy, you're reading truck books, you're labeling different types of trucks, you're matching letters to construction vehicles, you're telling stories about where the trucks are going, impromptu things that you're both making up. Science, you can explore simple machines, ramps, gravity, friction, wheels, axles, how different trucks are designed for different jobs. Oh my gosh, my two boys were all over this stuff when they were smaller. Sensory play, you can build construction sites with kinetic sand and dirt and rocks or water and let the trucks do the work, get some diggers going on. Fine motor skills, you can scoop and dump and load and use tweezers to clean up a construction site and build roads with blocks and all of that with trucks. Gross motor skills, you can create obstacle courses where your child drives as if they're a truck, where they can back up and turn and haul things and unload things. So you've got some imaginary play in there too, which is super fun. Social studies, learn about community helpers like garbage collectors, firefighters, road crews, delivery drivers. There's so much you can do. I'm having flashbacks to when my kids were small. With art, you can paint with toy truck wheels. You can do the tracks. Do you ever see those videos when the penguins walk through the paint and then they walk
Yeah.
on papers and the rescues use them to sell the artwork and raise money? I'm like, I would buy penguin feet art. Yes. You can design construction signs or create a city map all around the truck concept. Outdoor exploration, go on truck safaris. We used to do this. I lived right near I-75 in Florida. We would pack snacks and ride our bikes, and there was a big I-75 overpass there. Oh my gosh, a big one would go by. The kids would be like, oh my gosh, that one was huge. We'd sit there for like 2 hours and watch trucks go by. Delivery vans that deliver in your neighborhood. Dramatic play, you could turn a cardboard box into a dump truck. Oh, we talked about how magical cardboard boxes are in preschool. Make a tow truck, an excavator, whatever. All of that is a win. Your kiddo is getting all the skills that they need to prepare them for the things that come next, but it's being done in a way that's age and developmentally appropriate way. In other words, there was not a workbook. I never mentioned a workbook at all there. Okay. But you've made the learning more engaging and given them a better chance at retaining it because it related to their interests and it was play and it was fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you have questions about that, like Megan said, we just did a whole episode on play-based learning. And if you're doing play-based learning, it should be interest-led as well. Go back
Mhm.
and listen to that one. Okay, so now let's fast forward a bit to elementary school. So we're not talking preschool, kindergarten. We have those together for a very specific reason because of the data. So elementary school, first grade and on. Now, here we're likely going to differ a bit in our approach. For us in our family in early elementary school, we're moving into more formal curriculum. Now, our curriculum then and now tends to be very child led. And when it is child led, in many ways, that's the same thing as interest led.
Mhm.
If it is something my kiddo is like, oh, I like this, or I like these books that are in this one more than I like the books in this. That's their interest leading that ship. They're far more interested in learning it and retaining it because it's of interest to them. I know in my curriculum coaching sessions, I always encourage parents to identify a few of their top picks and then have their kiddo review them and pick which one they want to use or at least try first. You've got free samples and you can look at things like the book lists and even just visually looking at a flip through on YouTube or something like that so that they have an idea if it's something that is of interest to them. For us, interest learning is going to come in other ways as well. Electives for sure, but also maybe more like project-based learning. Like I remember when my kiddo was in second grade, he read something about ice and ice hotels, and there was some stuff on permafrost that really caught his attention. So for us, that led to hours hours of research on all of those things, ultimately culminating in a night at an ice hotel in Finland. I'm not saying that you have to pack your kid up and take them to some other country to make interest led learning work, but there are lots of ways that you can do it and incorporate it into everything else you're doing. We had the science and the reading comprehension of all of the different things that he was reading. And he ended up even writing a thing about salmon soup because he discovered it when we were in Finland and thought it was delicious and fascinating because I had never heard of salmon soup in the United States. Even in early elementary school, for us, our days were a mix of structure and free learning time, not to mention the flexibility to push whatever science lessons or reading or ELA lessons we had planned for that week to another week so that we could use all of the free resources that NASA had on permafrost or watch videos on how ice hotels are actually made. All of that said, I'm going to guess in your house, you'd still be going full steam ahead on interest-led learning related projects and rabbit hole life and significantly less curriculum. Is that accurate, Megan?
True story. Definitely accurate. Yeah. So significantly less curriculum at this stage for us was no curriculum. But it's not to say you couldn't have curriculum and still do this. It just was the choice for us that was how we worked. I mean, I guess actually, really what you could say is I was kind of writing my own curriculum in the sense that I was building unit studies that were broad and varied and had something for every kid in it. And we were using external resources, whether it was books or documentaries and all of it. So, I mean, that kind of is the curriculum. It was just not something we were buying. So, as an example, let's say you have a kiddo who is totally into horses, loves horses. I'd be all in on horses. And I have some examples of what that might look like. But again, I would be differentiating this like mad. So, I'm just going to throw out some random examples. But for example, in this list that I'm about to share, there's stuff in here about sketching horses. Okay. I have two dysgraphic kiddos, and sketching would be torturous for them. They don't like it. They're not interested. It's uncomfortable for them. I'm not going to require that. I'm not going to give it to them. So this is by no means a rigid list. This is a list to say, these are all the ways you could incorporate learning in and around horses. Do what works for your kid. And if you're super duper like, I want to hit every subject, then find something that's not sketching that's horse related. Okay. Like sculpture or something. I don't know. Figure something out. Build one out of popsicle sticks. I'm not sure, but I'd come up with something. But it should be very interest led and very tailored to your kiddo. Okay, so the list is long, so I'm going to go pretty speedy. Wherever you're listening on your player, go 0.75 if you need to, okay? Otherwise, we're going to be here for a really long time. Okay, reading. This can be your kiddo reading independently, or it can be audiobooks, etc. The Black Stallion, Misty of Chincoteague, King of the Wind, Black Beauty, Horse Diaries. Amazing. Nonfiction. National Geographic Kids, Everything Horse Book. There's a million horse books. You can read all of them. And if you have a kiddo who really loves horses, they might want to, and that's totally okay. Let them. For writing, you can keep a riding journal if your kid happens to ride horses. They could write a care guide for a first time horse owner, create a fictional stable, and write stories that are set in the fictional stable with the different horses and their personalities and the caretakers and all that good stuff. Research and write about different horse breeds if you have a nonfiction type of kiddo. Interview a local equestrian or an equine veterinarian. For science, you've got horse anatomy and physiology. There's genetics and coat color inheritance. Most kids in elementary school are not learning Punnett squares, but if you have a kiddo who's like, how does that horse have spots? You could teach that stuff, even though it's way ahead of what's at grade level. Because if they're interested, they'll get it. They'll be all over it. Nutrition and digestive systems, ecosystems, and the role of wild horses. Super fun if you can go see wild horses. I had to teach my kid what sex was way earlier than planned because of those wild horses. When they're excited, there's no hiding it. You can't be like, oh, I'm not sure. Maybe he's swollen because he has a boo-boo. There's no denying what's happening there. So yeah, we had that talk much earlier than I planned. Thank you. Okay, history. How horses transformed transportation and the way people interacted in society with the ability to utilize horses in that way. Horses in agriculture and farming and the advancements that caused. The Pony Express, okay? Cavalry units throughout history. If you really want to dig into what a piece of shit Custer was, oh gosh, they shot their horses at the end of the battle and used their bodies as a barricade before they still got their asses kicked because they were trying to steal shit that wasn't theirs. But anyway, the role of horses in westward expansion and indigenous cultures, amazing. Math, feed and hay calculations, measuring height and hands, stable budgeting, because you might have a horse lover who's like, can I have one? And you'll be like, well, they're expensive as hell. So let's do some math. Calculating riding speeds and distances, geometry through arena design and fencing, unit conversions with pounds, kilograms, acres, etc. Here's the art one. Okay. So sketching horses from observation. That would not be a hit in our household. Studying famous horse paintings and sculptures. We saw a painting one time when we were at a museum in London, and my daughter actually pointed it out. She was like, the scale of that is all off. And it was some dude on his horse. And you could just tell he was one of these like Pete Hegseth types who's completely insecure. And he was like, make me look really big in comparison to the horse. And it ended up, you really had to look, but once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. So that was fun. Yeah, so that's in there. Learning proportions and movements, that's part of it. Hello. There's so much. Geography, map where famous horse breeds originated from, study wild horse populations around the world, explore climates where different breeds thrive, compare ranching regions across different countries, time management around animal care, the routines, the rhythms, things like that. Responsibility through daily care. Oh gosh, they require a lot. Could they volunteer at a rescue or at a therapeutic riding center if you have one nearby? Field experiences. Can you visit barns and equestrian centers, attend a horse show, tour veterinary clinics if available, meet farriers, the people who do the horseshoes? That would be so cool. Trainers, breeders, equine nutritionists. You can explore different career options, whether it's veterinarian, equine dentist, stable manager, mounted police officer, saddle fitter. I mean, it's all there. So with a plan like that, you're still going to end up covering reading, writing, math, science, history, geography, art, all that stuff. But the context is quite different. So instead of asking a child to learn through topics that they don't care about, right? You get a workbook and there's mindless sentences in there about random nothings, or they're supposed to read passages about a baseball game and answer questions about the passage. And they have zero interest in that thing. Instead, in my world, we're covering all those same academic skills, but through something that they already love. And so for us, that's the magic of interest-led learning. So yeah, different from your world. But if you had an equine lover, Amanda, what would you do in your world? How would that fit?
Well, yeah, we would definitely incorporate it in lots of our reading and documentary and TV watching, possibly a research project, definitely field trips, writing subjects. We'd probably do horseback riding as PE because where we live, we have to have PE. For us, we definitely enjoy this type of interest-led learning. It's just that it gets interwoven with our curriculum and our other learning objectives. Realistically, our quote unquote academics only take a few hours. So we have lots of time for exploring other fun learning projects without it feeling like extra work that we have to do. It's not a reward, it's just part of what we're learning and how we're balancing it with everything else. All right. So with that, let's move right along to middle school. And this is my current existence. So it is right in my sweet spot. Honestly, a lot of this is going to be the same as how we did in elementary school. I will say in later elementary school and middle school, we do more child led unit studies, especially when life has me too busy to be able to oversee and be super involved in kind of school time. I've talked about it before, but when I'm super busy during the school year or maybe really down in bed with a chronic illness flare, I give my kiddos several of our, meaning Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, unit studies, and sometimes the smaller unit studies from Mint and Bloom. And I just encourage my kiddo to explore them, whatever interests him. Watch the videos. We can get the books if you want. We can maybe get some e-versions, reserve them at the library and send your dad to go pick them up if I can't get there. And he can do whatever he wants with that. Sometimes it leads to more, sometimes not.
Yeah.
Sometimes he does a little bit of it and it's not of interest to him. And that's okay because
Mhm.
that's what we're doing at that point. It's exposure. Here are a bunch of things. What interests you? What do you want to run with? And what is it like? Oh, well, that was some new knowledge. I filed it away, but I don't need more. And
Mhm.
both of those things are totally fine when you're doing child led learning and interest led learning. And we'll talk about that more, but this idea of exposure and just encouraging them to find the things that they want to learn more about.
Mhm.
But how about you, Megan? What does this look like in middle school for you in your home?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest difference when we got into middle school was that I was involved a little bit less. There was more independence happening, which is a natural developmental process.
Yeah.
But also, my kids were diverging more with their interests. So when they were younger, and I had three small children that I was homeschooling in the elementary years, it was easier for us to sometimes find common interests that we could all work on together as a group. And sometimes that was also trip preparation. If we were going to a cave, we would spend weeks studying caves and bats and this and that before we went. So we would do that kind of stuff together as a group. And then other times it would be a matter of kind of putting together a whole bunch of interests and then all of them kind of going, yeah, we all like that one. And we would do that. By middle school, their interests were diverging enough that it became really, really challenging for us to do stuff like that. We would still do it for trip prep. Like before we went to Normandy, there was a whole thing on D-Day, and we did that as a group. But for the most part, that's kind of how it was. So they needed slightly less of me, which was good because having three kids going in three directions could be a lot. And so they still have periods of intensity where they're super into something like the permafrost that you were talking about. They'll have those things where it's like, I need to learn all the things about this topic. But I find right now they spike in intensity at different points. So that helps me keep my sanity when it comes to which one needs different things. So, for example, a few months ago, I was pretty deep in partnering with my oldest kiddo on looking for some resources. And now he's off. He decided what he wanted to do, and we found the resources and we signed up for the things and we made a plan. And so he's doing his thing. And I'm just checking in from time to time at this point. But now my middle kid is fired up about a project that she's ready to embark on. And so that's taking up a lot of my time and energy right now. So thankfully, it's rare that all three of them are transitioning to a new area of focus or super fired up about something all at once, which does make it more manageable if you have multiple kids. The other thing that I think changed is from elementary to middle school, I was also less focused on each kid hitting every single quote unquote subject with every single project. So when we did the horse thing, it was like, okay, here's how you're going to hit these foundational subjects that are really important for kids to have and to have that baseline of knowledge. Once they got to middle school, I got better about zooming out and realizing that they were getting it all, but not necessarily in every single project. So sometimes some of the stuff my daughter's working on, she's super knee deep into science and it'll be biology or chemistry or microscopy, super knee deep. And she's an artist. She's a fiber artist. So that sounds random, but trust me, there's tons of it in there. Other times she's down a really deep hole related to history and the origins of colors. And she'll be going back to the cradle of civilization and Mesopotamia and looking at how snails were involved in dyeing fabrics and stuff like that. So at this age, it could just be me. And then I like chilled out a little bit too, where I was like less nervous about it having to be like, we have to hit all the subjects. But by middle school, I was more chill about subjects and realized like they're getting it all. So I can share a brief example of what that looked like for my daughter in middle school. So again, if you're new to the podcast, her entire education has basically revolved around fiber arts. And during the middle school year, she participated in 2 different fiber studies with a guild that she belonged to. They were structured similarly, but had different themes. So I'll just talk to you about one of them. But basically, everybody who committed to this year-long study of fibers would order this sample pack, and it would show up with, I don't remember, 12, 15 samples of fiber or something. They were little 2-ounce samples, and it would be different breeds of sheep and goats, and everybody within the study group would spin their own sample and make yarn out of it. And then they would have regular meetings, and one person was assigned each one of the samples to go and present. So sometimes you'd be showing up with your sample and you still had a hands-on experience with that sample, and everybody would talk about the difference of how it felt versus this other goat breed. I'm not a fiber artist, so I don't have the flowery language to describe it, but they would discuss how this goat fiber was different than the other goat fiber. But then one person was presenting on the origin of that species of goat and how it's processed and the way you need to treat it and all this kind of stuff. And then she'd have a turn to present. So sometimes you're learning from other people, sometimes you're presenting. So she was getting history, geography, protein structure of fiber, knowledge of the animals, random factoids about Angora rabbits during World War II. She found this super random paper that was a copy of a speech or something that Winston Churchill had given, where he encouraged the British people to farm Angora rabbits because rabbits multiply really quickly, as we know. And I mean, they were an island, and so they had food scarcity and shortages during the war and rationing and all of that. But rabbits multiply very quickly, and there's meat and et cetera, et cetera. So it was super interesting to find that this prime minister that we've heard so much about and all this stuff through history was talking about rabbits. So it was just like one of many projects that she'd be managing throughout the year. It wasn't the sole focus of her year, but it's all balancing out where she's got all these different projects going on. Okay, so high school. Dun, dun, dun. This is the part where people start freaking out about transcripts, which FYI are not that hard. If your kiddo is college bound, some people might start thinking that they need to trim back the interest-led follies at this point and buckle down with the real school stuff for the kiddo to be ready to go to university and get into university. But it's totally not the case. I mean, it's not true. So
Yeah. And I mean, I think for us, there's not a big shift in what we're doing, but I will say, again, this is one of those things. First off, we're not here yet. So I want to be really honest about that and put that out there. But also, Megan and I homeschool very differently, and we are parenting pretty different kids. I have an only who is also definitely a multi-potentialite. He's interested in all sorts of things. He's not really a go deep and learn all of the things about one subject for an extended period of time kind of kid. He enjoys learning pretty much every thing, subject, course, book that I have thrown at him.
it's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some he studies for longer chunks of time and some he doesn't. They were just not that interesting. And so we've done a really good job, and we're very fortunate that this has happened, but we've done a really good job of cultivating this love of acquiring new information in our home and homeschool. So for us, he wants to go to university. He plans to go to probably an elite university. His interests are super varied. Everything from creative writing to history to engineering to business to Lego design. And he's constantly dabbling in new things. The last few months, he's been doing tons of stuff with Pokemon, and he's just started coding, and he's constantly on to new things and learning new things. And he'll pick them up and he'll put them down. I have absolutely no idea what this kid is actually going to do for a job. And I absolutely expect him to have a few wildly different careers as an adult. He's going to be that person that's like, wait, how did you go from being an accomplished this to doing this? And then and now you're here? And he's going to be like, yeah, isn't that what everyone does? My mom always said it was fine. And I'll be like, yeah, but it was great. So I'm just doing my best to make sure that he's exposed to loads of things and has a really solid foundation in all of the standard areas. Honestly, so he has the best chance of excelling wherever he ends up with wherever he goes. At the middle school level, my kiddo had already made it really clear that he felt unit studies and project-based learning didn't teach him all of the things that he wanted to learn. He wanted to make sure he was using curriculum. He liked the way that standard traditional curriculum was laid out, especially with things like math. He wanted that sequential, we learn this, and then we learn this, and then we learn this, and it all builds on each other, and I'm learning all of the things. And then he still wants to have the flexibility of being able to explore more where and when he wanted to. I don't really foresee that being any different when we get to high school. We're pretty close. I assume he'll want to continue learning that way, given everything I know about him, but we're open to that changing. That's part of homeschooling. But we are making those decisions together now, and we will continue. It will still be very child directed. So, will I assign research projects on things he isn't interested in? Probably not, or at least not often. I probably will every once in a while, because if he really wants to go to college or university at some point, he's going to have to do a research project on something he could not care less about. And he has to have that experience, but that's not going to be our regular. He'll have the freedom to pick topics he wants to go deeper with. Will I always encourage him to read and learn about things he's interested in? Absolutely. Are we going to Machu Picchu later this summer because he learned about it and wanted to experience it firsthand? Yep, we are. Thank you, Travel Zoo. Not sponsored. They do not give us any money, but they are a discount travel website that my family likes to use for some of our adventures. We are incredibly fortunate to be able to be part-time world schoolers. And for us, that's what interest-led learning looks like in our home. This interwoven path of curriculum and doing standard things, allowing him to help pick the curriculum to make sure it's books he's interested in, topics he's interested in, things he'll actually want to dive into and do each day, mixed in with interesting field trips. And again, we're fortunate enough that our family vacations are often education related and can tie into things that he's seen or he wants to know more about. And just kind of doing all of that stuff together.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I've given all these examples of things that my kids have done, but I have a kiddo who's basically like that. He wants to learn math in a sequential order, and he wants a curriculum for math, and he wants a tutor for math. It's his choice. So it's totally interest led. And then is he learning a million things outside of that? Yeah. So I do have one who's kind of doing what you're doing by his choice. Same thing. So even within my own household of 3 kids, I have all 3 of them applying interest-led learning very, very differently. So yeah, that's a good point. That works too. So I think for me, one of the biggest trends that I see around interest-led learning when we get to high school is that people typically slot interests solely into electives. And I feel like that creates this subliminal divide between real learning and fluff learning or extra learning, fun learning, bonus learning, whatever. And you can certainly do that. There's no rule that says you can't do that. Some states have a specific outline that's required for graduation where you need 4 math classes and 4 literature classes and 3 science classes. Some states have that. When we lived in South Carolina, that's how it worked. My oldest graduated there. If memory serves me, there were 6 elective slots on the chart that we had to fulfill. So we aren't going to get huge into credits here. We'll be here for 3 hours. And full disclosure, my power went out while we were recording this episode. So the clock reset, and I'm not even sure how long we've been recording. Hopefully this isn't 3 hours already. We'll find out. So yeah, we'll see. So we're not going to get into credits and transcripts a ton here. We've covered that so much in other episodes. And there's an entire section in our book. It's section 4 of the workbook about graduating kids and how to build out high school transcripts. So it exists, just not in this episode. We are also aware that not all states have requirements like that. Some states have 0 graduation requirements for homeschoolers, and you can just do whatever the heck you want. In those cases, though, you would be smart to do what the university or next step that your kiddo plans to go to, you'd be smart to work backwards off of what they want. If your state isn't giving you that guidance, there should still be a plan. There should still be something happening. So a credit on a transcript is typically 150 course hours. I have 3 super neurodivergent kids. And it was like you were saying before about the permafrost. When the hyper focus kicks in, 150 hours is nothing. My kids could do that in a month and a half if they really wanted to, and sometimes they really do. So sometimes they've had rabbit hole topics where they're deep in a rabbit hole for months and months and months on end. The snails from the northern coast of Africa that originated the color of purple, that was months of research. I cannot even begin to tell you. So yeah, I can list that as an elective on a kiddo's transcript and have it count towards their graduation, which totally works, but it doesn't have to be. So an example, my oldest kiddo, when he was in his high school years, did this ridiculous bananas deep dive into astrophotography. This went on for well over a year. And when I tell you it was a hyper focus for well over a year, I am not kidding. So it started with just an interest in taking beautiful pictures of the night sky, and then became a serious study of astronomy. So in order to successfully photograph galaxies, nebulae, planets, star clusters, he had to learn how the night sky actually works. And that meant studying celestial coordinates and constellations and seasonal sky changes and the Earth's rotation and the phases of the moon and light pollution and atmospheric conditions. And there was a whole telescope phase. So there was telescope research and optics and camera sensors, because it started with a DSLR and then graduated to a mirrorless camera. So you're getting into all of that with focal length and exposure. Then he learned software for image stacking. Spoiler alert, when you see star trails or the big Milky Way clusters, that's like 100 photos that are all stacked on top of one another. Nobody's really getting that in a single photo. So he learned all of that stuff. He 3D printed himself a star tracker that he then coded, and he could put his camera into this star tracker and polar align it so that, I'm not going to explain this well because this is not my field, but basically it was like, if you're trying to do that thing where you're taking like 100 photos of the same thing and stack them, the Earth is moving, even if it's really slowly, the Earth is moving. And so in this thing, he programmed it and coded it so that it would polar align, so that it rotated at the same speed, rate, whatever, as the Earth, so that his camera was moving, so that he was still getting the same exact frame all the time. You can tell space is so not my thing. But then he could take all those photos and stack them. He joined an online association that had virtual telescopes that were like NASA level telescopes, and you could rent time on the telescope. So if there was a night sky event thing, you could book yourself 15 minutes and virtually use this telescope that was like on a remote island in Chile. So he had that. And then that same thing had these online educational badges that you could earn and classes you could take. He did a National Park Service program on the night sky. I mean, when I tell you the kid went deep, I'm not kidding. This was not just a hobby. This was a rigorous applied astronomy course. And a traditional astronomy class might have students read about galaxies in a textbook. Aiden had me out shivering in the desert in Utah until 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, if I get attacked by a bobcat for this, I'm going to be so pissed. And you just can't even compare the depth in those two approaches between textbook and that experience. So yeah, I could make that an elective, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no rule about it. But why can't that also be a science course? That is undoubtedly a legitimate earned science credit. It's probably an honors science credit with the amount of time and energy and depth that he went into. So it doesn't have to be a traditional learning experience for it to be worthy of ending up in the core classes section of a transcript. And that's totally allowed.
So there really isn't a right way or a wrong way to incorporate interest-led learning. We are each doing it differently, but successfully. And from what I know of your homeschooling journey, you're not even incorporating it the same way across all three kids, like you were just saying. So again, just like so many other things in homeschooling, it is flexible and can be adapted to your needs, your goals, to your kiddo, your family, et cetera, et cetera. It is flexible. It can absolutely be adapted. The key is to remind yourself that when they're interested, they learn better. Now, before we wrap up for the week, we'd love to just quickly talk about some of the important aspects of interest-led learning. We've given you lots of examples, lots of food for thought, but if you need it distilled down into a too long didn't read, didn't listen, here, these are important. Number one, exposure. We've talked about this before. We've talked about it before, especially in our intentional unschooling discussion earlier this season. We've talked about it in this episode. All humans don't know what they don't know. So when it comes to interest-led learning, We, as the adult in the situation, still have some steering and guidance to do. Part of that should truly involve expanding beyond the core interest focus. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Say you've got a kiddo who loves sharks. That's awesome. Great. Fantastic. Spend some time there exploring all of that in all of the fun ways. No problem. But you can also nudge growth outside of that pinhole of an interest. Maybe you start with general ocean exploration. Which sharks live in which oceans? How does one ocean differ and support the existence of that specific shark? From there, maybe expand into the study of marine biology as a whole. You could find a documentary or a biography of a marine biologist. Through that exploration, the scientist is likely to discuss other marine animals or introduce the idea of conservation. That opens the door for discussion about your kiddo's role in conservation and a deep dive on climate science. From climate science, hey, what do you know? Now you're analyzing data. So you're learning that field as well. It can truly just go on and on like this over time. So what you want to do is make sure that you're providing lots of exposure to lots of different things. And when you have a specific thing, visualize it like a bullseye. In this case, sharks are the very center of the bullseye. But in our role as the homeschool grown-up, we can be introducing our kids to the topics in the ring of the bullseye just beyond the center. When we model curiosity and fully support interest-led learning, there's a good chance they'll end up jumping into the next thing out from the center of the bullseye all on their own, or maybe with a little bit of a nudge from us.
Yeah. All right. Number two, another thing we would love to discuss is the my kid has no interest. So where do I even begin situation? This can be a result of many things. It could be a school trauma situation. Totally understandable. It could be a result of video game or screen addiction or something else that you need to gently and carefully uncover over time. But generally, more exposure can help uncover interests. And sometimes it does require a screen detox, dare I say it. Parents who model curiosity and growth mindset is a great step towards that. Family projects where you're all learning something new together and sharing it with each other, checking out new things from museums to tours to talks with family and friends, free intro classes online. Again, there's so many options for kids. But if they see you doing it first and setting the tone, they might be more likely to agree and try something new like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I am also going to say sometimes the my kid has no interests thing isn't so much that they don't want to learn or that they have no interest, but maybe your kid isn't obsessed with all things fiber arts, or maybe your kiddo likes to learn things at a surface level, but then they aren't diving super deep on the vast
Hmm.
majority of things. That's okay.
Hmm.
Honestly, probably the only thing I've ever gone super deep on for me is travel. And I didn't study it in college. I've never made money doing it. I spent a lot of money doing it, really. But I love knowing lots of things about lots of things. But I am certain I don't have any interests that even begin to rival Megan's kiddos. If your kids are happy to learn, that's enough. This interest led learning thing, I think, is kind of like dual enrollment. Sometimes in homeschooling communities and homeschooling groups, certain things get held up as the way to homeschool. And it can feel like you're doing it wrong if it isn't right for your kiddo and your family. But please, please remember that there are lots of right ways to homeschool. And yeah, we definitely don't want your kiddo bored to tears or dreading their learning or their curriculum or their schoolwork. But it also doesn't have to look like deep dives and rabbit holes that somehow cover reading, writing, and arithmetic all at the same time. Interest led learning can just be your kiddo is actually interested in
Hmm.
this part of history, or they like the books, the novels in this ELA curriculum over that one. So you use this one so that they actually enjoy it. That can be your interest led learning. Okay, off my soapbox. Number 3. If you've been listening and you're like, I know, I get it. I need to stop waiting for us to have time to slot something interest led in because somehow it never seems to happen. And I need to figure this out because our learning is flat or cookie cutter or whatever you might be thinking. But also at the same time, you're not sure exactly where to start. Maybe try replacing one thing, one boring thing, one cookie cutter generalized task or assignment, just each week. You don't have to overhaul your entire homeschool overnight to try something new. Just pick one thing and ask yourself, how could I teach this thing through something that they already enjoy?
Hmm. All right, number 4, last but certainly not least, because this is a pretty big one. With all this interest led exploration, please, please, please protect your child's interests. Sometimes homeschoolers accidentally kill the thing that they're trying to use as an interest led learning topic, especially if you're newer to homeschooling and you're more likely to turn things into what feels like school because you're still finding your rhythm and your groove, which is totally natural. So what do we mean by that? Let's say you have a kiddo who enjoys bird watching, and next thing it's like bird spelling, bird grammar, bird math, bird handwriting, but all in a drill and kill, rote memorization, no options, no input sort of way. Some kids might like that. I don't know a ton that love drill and kill worksheet style learning, but some kids might. But for plenty of kids, unfortunately, you just killed their love of birds and bird watching is no longer fun.
Well, yeah. And I would say that you mentioned it applies especially if you're new, but I feel like it also applies if you're working with a teen because teenagers
Mm.
are going through puberty and they're much more likely to be less obvious about their interests or what they want to do. And so when they do throw something out, you're like, oh, yes, we can work with that. And then now they're like, oh, I gave them something and they fucking ruined it,
Yeah.
like this sucks. I'll just go back to give me online Khan Academy or whatever it is. So just be careful. Yeah, just be careful.
Yeah, exactly. Teenagers, it's like steel trap, clamp, never opening that again. I just did them once, we're done. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, when you're doing interest led learning, leave oodles and oodles of time for unstructured exploration. All of the really deep projects that I told you about that my kids participated in, I didn't drive any of those. Absolutely not a single one. It was all stuff that they brought and they decided to do. So when you can create that culture, you don't have to require and you don't have to push, and then they will stick with you and they'll be interested. So there's plenty of value in organic exploration. You don't have to turn everything into an academic lesson. Take a breath. It's going to be okay. So as we wrap up, bear in mind, teachers in traditional classrooms need to teach one lesson to 30 children. You don't, unless you've been very prolific. I
And
don't
you
know.
just don't have your TLC show yet.
I did grow up in a very religious environment. I don't know anybody with 30, but there were a lot sometimes. Okay. So, okay. But you're not teaching 30 kids. Homeschooling lets you teach one kid 30 different ways. You have so much flexibility. You have so many options. So leverage the freedom that you have, the flexibility that you have, because that's the beautiful part about homeschooling.
Yep, absolutely. All right, peeps, let's wrap up with our mantra for the day. You hung in there, you stuck with us. I think it was a long one. Like we said, timing got a little messed up because of a power outage on Megan's end, but you made it, we made it, and we have a mantra for you. An interest isn't a distraction from learning. It's often the invitation that makes deep understanding possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you want to talk about interest led learning more, come to Patreon, come hang out with us, book a coaching session. We could talk about this stuff all day, as evidenced by the length of this episode. So in the
Yeah.
meantime, happy homeschooling, friends.
Yeah. Have a great one.